What is up, Shaping Nation? This is Nick Torres here, and on this episode of Shaping Your Pottery, I got to interview Collin Lynch. Collin makes some really incredible crystal pottery that has evolved into making unicorn sculpture pottery. In this episode, you will learn how Collin went from working at Starbucks to owning his own business with his pottery. You'll also learn how each step leads to the next one with your pottery and can go into the next idea. You'll also learn about Colin's best tips to use social media to help you grow as an artist and help you sell your work even more. I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and I'll see you guys in there. Collin, welcome to Shaping Your Pottery, and share with me, what is something you love besides making pottery?
Besides making pottery, I have quite a few other hobbies. I am a really avid painter. I do oil painting. I also enjoy making music. Before I was making pottery, I was really into producing music, learning music theory, and all of that. And I also knit. So I do quite a few things with my hands and just creating things all the time. So, yeah, those are some of my recent hobbies.
So, would you say that your hobbies outside of pottery helped you with your pottery when you first started?
I think maybe with the painting in a way, but yeah, pottery really kind of, if I was a woodworker, maybe I would see more of that in pottery, but I don't feel like, aside from my painting, I have too many things that have incorporated into my pottery.
So, can you tell me the story how you got started in ceramics?
Yeah, I was finishing my master's in Chinese medicine, and I just started waking up in the morning feeling like I really want to squeeze clay. Like I just had this strange desire to squeeze like real clay, not polymer clay. And I have a few friends that do pottery, and I remembered, so I reached out to them. I was like, "Hey, I really just want to, check this out. I want to maybe go to a studio." And one of my friends set it up, and I got on the wheel, and it was the hardest thing I've ever tried to do. I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Oh, this I may not be able to do this." Knitting is really difficult to learn, and playing piano can be difficult as well. And when I got on the pottery wheel, I thought to myself, "Oh, this might be the one thing that I can't do." And once I said that, I was like, "Well, now I have to figure this out." So it really just kind of started very organically. I was just wanting to get my hands in some mud and make some pieces. I had been asking friends who did pottery, I was like, I really just want like a simple, like Japanese kind of wabi-sabi cup. And not everyone has your aesthetic. And so I kind of thought to myself, I just need to go and make this myself. So that's really what got me in the studio. And from there, I was just going every single day that I could, spending all day there and just throwing, just trying to understand the wheel and, get a grasp on it.
When would you say was the moment your skills started to really start to develop?
I think that there are like little steps, because you start with just making cups. And, I asked for a lot of feedback from my teacher at the studio. So he would, give me a lot of criticism and things to kind of look for. And I just kind of noticed things happening in steps where I could make a cup, and then I could make a larger cup. And then, it started to go to bowls and just different shapes. And so I don't think there was an exact moment. I think there are just kind of little steps along the way where I just kind of little successes that would happen along the way.
I absolutely love that. Shape Nation, those little successes that you are building right now, they start stacking on one of another, and then you eventually end up building the skills you need to make the pottery that you want to be able to make. It just takes a little bit of time. I love that
Right.
so much. So tell me about the moment when you decided to go full time with your pottery.
Yeah, I'm about to graduate with my master's in Chinese medicine. I'm working at Starbucks, and I basically was just kind of making things at the pottery studio. And putting them up on my Facebook and just kind of using Etsy as my cash register. So I would put them up on Facebook and just tell people, they can go buy it on Etsy. And it was just pretend fun. I really wasn't planning on making a business out of this. And I I woke up one morning and someone that I didn't know had bought one of my pieces. And I was really perplexed. I was like, how did they even find me? I'm such a small, unknown potter. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, like someone would buy my work. That's crazy. Someone I didn't know. And eventually I started, and at the time, had just gotten on Instagram. And I just started to share a little bit more. I made my own pottery page, SRI Ceramics, and I started getting sales. And I remember being at Starbucks and thinking to myself, I could be at home right now working on pieces, making more money than this. And thinking about, what am I doing here? I should be at home. Like, I really believed that if I had more time to put into my pottery, I could I could really build something. And so that's really what happened. Is one day I was just like, I put in my 2 weeks and I was just like, all right, let's just jump in. Let's see how this works. And, prior to jumping in, I'd been working at the pottery studio for a long time. And eventually I got my own wheel and brought it home. I kind of rearranged my apartment into a little studio, very, literally a wheel in the living room. And I got a small kiln set up. My landlord didn't know I set up a small kiln in one of the other rooms. And, it's just kind of, it was a hobby, but at the same time, I was like, I really think I got something going here. And so, yeah, after getting sales and stuff, being at Starbucks, I was like, I think I could leave Starbucks now and do my own thing. So that's kind of how it happened.
So before you put your 2 weeks notice in at Starbucks, what were you feeling? Like, what were the emotions you were feeling?
You know, I I was really just kind of going with the flow with everything. I didn't have a business plan. I wasn't strategizing. I just knew that I had an audience at the time on Instagram, and I had a lot of people knocking on my door like, "Hey, I want a piece. I want a piece." And I had just things were really happening and growing. And so I was more just excited about that. And Starbucks for me was just kind of more of it was like, I got to let this go. I got to cut this branch off, so that I can grow in this direction. And so, I can't exactly remember what I was feeling 7 years ago, but I know when I left Starbucks, I was scared, but also very excited. It was one of the most exhilarating moments of my life, to take off on your own business. And I just kind of felt like I was free falling, but I just trusted that everything was going to be okay. So, yeah, I felt very alive at that time, very scared.
What would you say was your biggest obstacle when you went full time?
It was the demand. At the time, looking back, I wish that I had understood pricing a little bit more. I was practically giving my work away and just working myself to the bone. I didn't have anyone to guide me. So I was just taking orders and just kind of like things were just building. I was getting so many orders and kind of realizing, oh gosh, this is going to, I'm trying to set people's expectations for how long something is going to take. And I just kind of, I remember just being really overwhelmed in the beginning. And I know if I had adjusted my pricing a little bit more, I probably would have been able to throttle that and catch up in the beginning. So that was kind of to answer your question. Yeah.
So let's talk about your pottery. In one sentence, can you tell me what you make?
I make handmade, hand sculpted pieces inspired by nature.
So tell me the story how you started making the pottery that you make today.
So I've had a lot of iterations with my pottery. I'm most well known for my crystals, but I've done everything from flowers to skulls and cacti and horse, everything. But I started with my crystals, and it really just I when I started getting diving deeper into the pottery, I got into it to make this like kind of Japanese wabi-sabi aesthetic, but I also started to realize, oh, I could put crystals on my work. And I originally wanted to use real crystals, and I thought, I could fire them into the clay. But when I realized that you really can't fire crystals into clay, I thought, well, maybe I can make the crystals out of clay. And so I got some of my favorite crystals, and I've always loved rocks and minerals. Ever since I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a geologist, and I just have a fascination with kind of everything magical and special. So I just kind of sat down with my crystals and tried to figure out, how I could achieve that shape, and started to get, in a direction. Originally, a lot of my work looked kind of like dragon scales, and it didn't look, the way it does now. And just over time, having made probably thousands of crystal mugs, I have, I know which direction every single crystal goes, and I just have developed kind of a signature style. So, but yeah, it all just started with loving crystals and wanting, I've seen other ceramic artists who have crystals on their work, but for me, I thought if I'm going to make a crystal mug, I want in your face, I want huge crystals, like just very maximalism at the time. And so that's really kind of how it started, where you just have this mug it's just flushed with crystals. So, yeah.
So, as you mentioned earlier, you are inspired by nature. How does this impact your pottery?
Well, I mean, I'm just constantly looking around my surroundings and taking things in, anything I find beautiful. Like probably a month ago, we had some primrose that were blooming, and I thought, God, that would be just so beautiful on a cup. I'm always just wanting to kind of capture nature and share it with people. And, I think that's really what every artist is doing in a way, just trying to, mimic nature, and in that we're just appreciating it so much. So, yeah, it's kind of, you know, how that inspires me.
So, very recently, you started making unicorn mugs. Can you
Hmm.
tell me the story about this?
Yeah, God, how did it even? Okay, so I do know how it started. So, and that's the other thing is everything kind of has like a one step leads to another, because getting to unicorn mugs really started with my desert collection, where I was making these peony mugs, and the peony mugs eventually moved me to being interested in sculpting cow skull mugs. And I'd never really done that sort of sculpture before, and I was really intimidated by it, and I was like, this is going to be so difficult. And I eventually got really into making these cow skulls, and I thought to myself, I started wanting to go in another direction after the cow skulls, and I was like thinking horses, and I thought, oh my God, unicorns, because I've been obsessed with unicorns since I was a kid. And I was like, let's just try to make a unicorn mug. And I, I still have the very first one, and to me now it looks awful, but it really just had a very. It didn't start with just me seeing a unicorn. I had some skills that had been building up, and I felt like I was then in a place where I could explore unicorns. Probably back when I was doing crystals, I never would have thought to myself, to explore doing that sort of sculpture with unicorns.
So, can you give me a simplified explanation on how you are creating your sculptures onto your pottery?
So I do hand sculpt every single unicorn. I don't use molds for anything that I make. And I basically just kind of take the general shape, like kind of a triangle, and I put it on the mug with slip, and just start to chip away at it and get the general shape. It's really everything is done on the mug versus it being made and then put on the mug. So yeah, the entire piece is just made entirely on the mug.
So why do you do it on the mug rather than doing it outside of the mug and attaching it later?
Sorry, there's a truck going by, so it's going to be loud.
It's all good.
So the reason why I make the piece on the mug is because my mugs, they have a roundness to them, and as I'm because the unicorn itself takes me probably about an hour and a half to make, and if you were to make something flat, it's going to be hard. It's going to just warp things, when you try to place it on the mug. So I like to start as early as I can on the mug so that I can adhere to the shape of the mug and really just work with the shape of the mug. And it also helps me because, my mugs, might have kind of one might be slightly taller than the next. And it helps me to just fully work on that piece and really see that piece as the canvas and just be able to work, from there. I feel like if I worked, you know, separately and then attached it, I would also be worried about it staying on the mug, versus with these because I put the slip on them, they really just stay on there. I don't have to worry about it coming off, due to drying in a weird way or something like that.
What advice would you give to someone trying to add sculptures onto their own pottery?
Well, I think to start, you want to make sure that the clay body that you're attaching to and the clay that you're using for the sculpture are around the same dryness, or wetness. You don't want your mug to be really dry and the clay you're working with really wet because then that clay that's really dry is already at a certain contraction and also just absorbency with the water, and it'll just create problems down the road. So that's one of the first things I make sure is that my clay is they're around the same wetness. And I think that's a really important part. And I don't know, there are just so many things to sculpt, and it just kind of really depends on what the person is doing, I guess. So I think that would be my one piece of advice is understanding like how wet things are. And I think another thing is knowing how much something is protruding from the the piece itself. I in the beginning with my pieces, I had things that were sticking out sometimes 2 inches. I look back on, I'm like, why would I do that? So I try to keep things now closer to the as close as I can. I don't want it sticking out so far. So those are probably two things I consider that are important.
So let's talk about discovering your voice. Can you tell me about the moment when you knew you were heading in the right direction with your pottery?
Yeah, I really wasn't when I started, I wasn't trying to make a business. I wasn't trying to, I was really just kind of flowing with things. And it wasn't until I looked back that I see, oh, that is my voice. It's very signature to me. I can tell that I made that, or I can tell when I made that. When I think because let me think about this, the best way to phrase it. Hmm. I think it just was so natural. And I think it's almost like your handwriting. Everyone just has a different handwriting. And so I think it's kind of maybe in the beginning when people are starting off, they like to, or it's a good exercise to look at other artists and kind of see what they're doing. And then eventually, once you kind of understand, because it's a good skill, it's a good exercise to do to gain a skill, is to kind of copy other artists for a little bit and see like how did they do that or what did they do, and then eventually you start to put your own voice into it. So but I don't think I ever had a moment where I felt like that I didn't have my own voice. I think I was always just in this very creative space, And I still am in the creative space where I'm just kind of, so there's no intention of, okay, how do I make this my voice? I just kind of, if I'm going to make a flower, I just kind of know, you know, how I'm going to make it. And I don't really look at, nature is always my reference. So I don't really look at other artists. I mean, when I was starting the horses, I did look at how other people sculpted their horses just to kind of understand things. But eventually I always go to the main source, and that's where I get my, by imitating nature, eventually your own voice comes into it.
Absolutely agree. Shaping Nation, you already have a voice just like you have your own handwriting style. You just have to start doing things that are more interesting to you so that voice actually starts coming to life more. I love that so much.
Right.
So you contribute your growth as an artist to social media.
Hmm.
How have you used social media to help you grow as an artist?
I mean, social media is just an amazing tool to reach a worldwide audience. In the beginning, back in 2015, Instagram was so different. You could just do nice photography and some good hashtags, and people just found you and shared you. It was very different. These days, social media is a little bit more, you have to put in a lot more work. But in the beginning, when I was starting off, it was me putting my work out there on social media and being shared by other people that were passionate about my work, and just growing from there, continuing to share. And it was very organic in the beginning. There was, you know, I I didn't really have to do a lot of work on social media. Now, making reels and engaging and doing lives and just everything, it's a lot more work on social media, and there are different platforms as well. And I think it's just kind of all about, I'm definitely like an older generation. I think I see a lot of the newer generation potters on TikTok doing really well, and they have their own vibe. And I think it's just kind of, you got to just find what vibe works for you and share the way you want to share. And but definitely use social media as a tool. That's when I see artists that don't use social media as a tool, you're kind of selling yourself short. You're not getting all the benefits of a huge audience that you could be getting.
So what can people start doing to get better at social media to help them sell and expand their own work?
Well, there are a lot of things. I mean, right now social media is very much about, videos and reels and TikToks. And I think you kind of have to do your own research, because one person will tell you on TikTok that videos need to be 3 minutes, and another person will tell you they need to be 7 seconds, and I think you have to find what works for you. I think the most important thing is engagement, though. You've got to, it's just like if your art was in a gallery, you would eventually build up a clientele that you would have a relationship with. And social media is really no different. You think of it as like your online gallery, treat it as that. And that's really, that's an important thing, is to, if you have a page that's dedicated to your work, treat it as a gallery. Take good photos. I had to learn photography. I had to spend thousands on a really good You don't have to spend thousands, but for me, after using my iPhone for probably 2 years for my product photography and just kind of getting to a ceiling, I realized I need to step up, what I'm offering or what I'm sharing, so that I can get more engagement and more sales. And so I ended up getting a really nice camera with a macro lens, and teaching myself photography, teaching myself Lightroom. And there are a lot of things that, you do have to learn to be successful with social media. And I think however much work you put into it, you will see that work, pay you back. So when I started doing my nicer photography it really made a difference. People could really understand my work more. They could see the beauty of it. And now with, the reels and the TikToks, you're allowing people to come into your studio, see more of how you work. They get to know your personality a lot more, and that's really important for engagement. So because people want to buy from someone who they can relate with and who they like and who makes them laugh or who interests them. So social media is really a powerful tool that a person should learn to harness for sure.
Definitely agree. Shaping Nation, you have to find your own vibe, much like with your own pottery for social media, so that you start doing things to start being able to sell your work, start being able to expand your own voice, and to just have an more enjoyable time with it. I love that so much. So as we are coming to a close here, what is one thing you want to hammer home with my audience today?
Hmm. I think the most important thing with pottery, as an artist, is that you're getting to share a part of your mind, a part of your soul with the world. And especially with pottery, there's sort of a permanence to it. People dig up pots from hundreds or thousands of years ago, and who knows, where your work could end up. And it's very exciting. And I think it's important to share what you're passionate about and just build your audience and build the people that support you around that. And just always use that as your North Star and just kind of guiding you and staying inspired. And it's normal to have times where you're not inspired and when you're crazy inspired and not sleeping at night because you have so many ideas, and to just flow with that, always just flow with things. And, I've had months where, I thought to myself, is this it? Is this the end? Or people no longer interested in my work? And you find there's so many extenuating circumstances that you have no control over. And it's important to just, if you're passionate about it, just keep going, just keep doing it, and, make it work. So that's what I would say.
Definitely agree. That was some excellent parting words. Colin, it was so great chatting with you today. Where can my audience go and learn more about you?
So I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Etsy, SRI Ceramics. That's ESSARAI _ceramics. And yeah, I'm pretty active on everything. So you can check me out on there.